Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my week number 17 running back rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season, going in depth through my top 36 running backs for your championship week in fantasy football. We're going to go out there and try to eat as many W's as possible. Shout out to Jameis Winston. Before we can get on into things, though, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you're doing up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 17. Crazy, it's already week 17. It's a little bit sad. Running back rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with my must-start running back ones with my running backs 1 through 6. At number 1, we have Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions going up against the San Francisco 49ers in Santa Clara this week on Monday Night Football. Now, without David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs is essentially a shoo-in to be a top 8 running back in fantasy football. We just saw Devon Achane run a train on this 49ers defense last week in Miami. So without David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs is in a great position to finish as the running back number 1 on the week, and I believe he clearly belongs inside of the top tier at the running back position going forward. At number 2, we have Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the Dallas Cowboys at home in Philly. Now, last time these two teams ended up playing was back in week number 10, and Saquon Barkley didn't have the greatest of showing. He was just the running back number 27, but after that is when we really started to see Saquon Barkley go on a tear. He is an incredibly consistent running back on an offense that is an absolute wagon, and facing up against the Dallas Cowboys defense, while sure, they have looked better as of recently, I have zero qualms with Saquon Barkley, and I think everyone knows that he's a no-brainer must-start running back 1. At number 3, we have Devon Achane, running back of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. While Chase Brown didn't have all that great of a game up against the Browns last week, Devon Achane is essentially a running back and a wide receiver at the exact same time. He is basically going to be receiving 6+ targets in every single game. Last week, he had 120 rushing yards as well as 70 receiving yards. He scored 31 PPR points as the running back number 3. With Tua Tagovailoa under center, Devon Achane has been incredibly consistent at the top of the chart at the running back position, so you gotta love Achane this week. Next up, we got Bijan Robinson going up against the left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders. So the battle of the B-Robs in Washington Sunday Night Football. Now, even with the change at the quarterback position going from Kirk Cousins to Michael Penix, we did end up seeing Bijan Robinson still be able to put up a solid amount of production as the running back 8, scoring 2 touchdowns up against the Giants. The Commanders defense is softer than baby shit, so I do really expect another solid performance out of Bijan. Next up, we got Josh Jacobs going up against the cold like Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. Now, the team really pulled the plug on Josh Jacobs early on Monday Night Football up against the Saints. This was a absolute disaster for the Saints, both offensively and defensively. They couldn't stop anything that the Packers had for them. Even when Malik Willis came into the game, he ended up playing very well, and the offense was as limp dick as it gets. While the matchup on paper isn't the best up against the Vikings, Josh Jacobs is running hotter than the sun, a top 12 running back now in every single game dating back to the bye week. So from weeks 11 through week 16, he's been a top 12 running back in every single game. And in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, he's been a top 6 running back. Just because he ended up not having the biggest game last week was only because, again, the Packers were up by so much they didn't have to keep on using him. Next up, to close out the must-start running back 1's tier, we got Chase Brown, running back of the Cincinnati Bengals, going up against the Denver Broncos at home in Cincinnati. Now, last week was a bit of a doozy if you were a Chase Brown owner. I fully expected him to put belt to ass up against the Cleveland Browns. He had been a top 10 running back in the prior 6 games, so I think that assumption was smart to be made. Obviously, it doesn't end up coming to fruition as the running back 22, but no need to panic at all. even in a spot up against Denver that isn't really a wet dream matchup, you got to keep loving on Chase Brown. Next up, we move on into the low-end must-start running back ones, headlined by Jonathan Taylor. Now, if you had Jonathan Taylor last week, it would be basically impossible for you to lose. If you had Jonathan Taylor and the Falcons defense, they probably scored damn near close to 80 fantasy points. Jonathan Taylor has yet another great matchup up against the Giants. The only thing that worries me here is that Jonathan Taylor was so good up against the Titans, 40 fantasy points, 200 plus rushing yards, 3 total touchdowns, that maybe he just simmered downs here, that maybe everyone starts giving him the gawk 9,000 special, even the people like myself who have been a little bit more pessimistic on Jonathan Taylor as of recently. Everyone buys back in, and Jonathan Taylor bends you over the table. But ultimately here, the matchup is too great up against the Giants to panic. At number 8, we got Chuba Hubbard going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. Chuba Hubbard hit the dagger into the back of the Arizona Cardinals defense last week in overtime with that game-winning touchdown, over 150 rushing yards, 2 total touchdowns, and he was the running back 2 last week up against the Cardinals. On paper, this isn't the best matchup for a running back up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but when Chuba Hubbard is hot, he is hot like... I make this joke all the time, but if you ever go to Jose Tejas, I don't know where Jose Tejas is across the United States, but there is one that I go to every once in a while, and if you ever get the fajitas from Jose Tejas and you accidentally touch the plate, I am not even kidding, you might have to get your hand amputated because the burns are going to mangle you that bad, right? It is absolutely so hot, and that is how hot that Chuba Hubbard has been running. So even in a rougher spot up against the Buccaneers, you got to keep rocking with the Chuba train, especially with how much better the offense has been playing. Next up, we got Bucky Irving going up against the Carolina Panthers. Now, it was a little bit suspect that the team ended up kind of throwing him on ice like a nice bottle of champagne. After kind of the first half, Bucky was running real well, and then the game kind of goes in the opposite direction. The Cowboys are playing much better than I suspected. Now, I do think the Carolina Panthers offense deserves credit where credit is due, but I do believe this is going to be a much better game script for Bucky Irving. So while he was just the running back 16 last week, this is a guy that we know could easily be the running back 1 in any given game. He had already done that once this season. He's been a top 8 running back multiple times, so up against the Panthers in a good spot, he belongs inside of the top 12. Next up, we got James Cook going up against the New York Jumbo Jets. Now, if you actually do some, you type into the internet, you do a little bit of research, you'll see that the Jets defense actually isn't the worst up against the run. But the eye test to me tells me that a running back like James Cook on his pedestal, a guy with that level of pedigree, a guy that we just ended up seeing finish back-to-back weeks as a top 5 running back, 2 touchdowns in both games, over 100 all-purpose yards in both games. While even if the matchup does concern you slightly, I have no worries about James Cook. This guy has been dominant 50 Shades of Grey style over the last 2 games, and we know that this isn't Fugazi. It's not a little Fugazi 2-game run. He's been a top 10 running back multiple times this season. So going up against the Jets in a spot that I personally like, against a Jets team that might be a little bit dead, in my opinion. Well, they already are dead for the playoffs, but they just didn't really look good last week, so I like James Cook a ton. Next up, we got Kyren Williams going up against the Arizona Cardinals. We just saw what Chuba Hubbard did to the Arizona Cardinals defense, and Kyren Williams is incredibly safe. He's like wrapping a Trojan around your fantasy football team. Now, the production hasn't been the highest as of recently. He hasn't necessarily been this locked and loaded top 10, top 12 running back, but he is a respectable top 20 running back every single week, and in a matchup like this up against the Cardinals, I believe he gets the bump up into being a top 12 back in my rankings. Next up, we got Joe Mixon going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Joe Mixon has kind of slammed on the break as of recently, running back 26 up against the Dolphins in a game where he got banged up, and then last week he was the running back 38. But I warned everyone. I was like, Paul Revere, the British are coming. The British are coming. When you go up against the Kansas City Chiefs, that is going to be a matchup of death for running backs in fantasy football. The Chiefs defense locks up running backs and throws away the key. Now, Joe Mixon was so good that I found it hard to truly bury him in my rankings, but now going up against the Ravens, this also isn't a great spot, but I do expect him to bounce back to be at minimum like a fringe top 12 guy, right? You're still firing up Joe Mixon with supreme confidence. Next up, we move on into the third tier here, which is the high-end running back twos, beginning with Zach Charbonnet, who is questionable. He was limited in practice on Monday. Mr. Kenneth Walker exited the game last week, and based upon the fact that Kenneth Walker just continues to get banged up and banged up and banged up, I don't think that's a good indicator that he ends up playing on Sunday. Now, I am as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins. This game's actually on Thursday, so that also wouldn't point towards Charbonnet being the running back 2, Walker being the 1. I think Charbonnet will end up being the starter. When Charbonnet has been the lead back on the Seattle Seahawks, this is a guy that puts up top 12 numbers. Zach Charbonnet is an incredibly underrated running back, and honestly, I think he's better than Kenneth Walker. The Bears' defense is going to be ripe for the taking here, so assuming Charbonnet is good to go, and assuming he's the lead back, he definitely belongs in the potential running back 1 conversation, so I got him as a high-end running back 2. Next up, we got Derrick Henry, Tractor Cito, going up against the Houston Texans in Houston on Christmas. Now, some people might have Derrick Henry ranked a little bit higher, and expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros got him as the RB7. I have him as my running back 14. Now, that isn't really a dig on Derrick Henry, who has kind of fallen like Humpty Dumpty off the wall as of recently, but it's more of a push towards the fact that, hey, the Houston Texans defense is pretty solid up against the run. So while Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry, and while a majority of you guys aren't going to fucking sit him in your fantasy football playoffs, there is reasons, and in your championship game, there is a reason to be a little bit more nervous. Next up, we got James Conner going up against the LA Rams. Now, James Conner did suffer a knee injury on Sunday, leaving the third quarter. He was going in like that Lil Wayne and Drake song. He was going crazy. He was putting belt to ass prior to the injury. The man had 117 rushing yards, 49 receiving yards. He was the running back 6, 3 straight games inside the top 7 in PPR. So while this is something to monitor, if James Conner plays when he's been playing this well, you gotta throw him in your lineup. Next up, we got Aaron Jones Sr. going up against the Green Bay Packers for the cold like Minnesota Vikings. Now, Aaron Jones hasn't been this consistent staple top 12 running back that I personally thought he could be coming into the season, but this is a revenge game for Mr. Aaron Jones. Last time these two teams played was back in week 4, and he was the running back number 16. I feel pretty good about him as, again, sure, he's not this locked and loaded top 12 running back, but he does belong in that higher end running back 2 range. Anywhere from running back, I would say 13 to 20 is a good spot for Aaron Jones. Next up, we got Jerome Ford, F-150, going up against the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins defense is softer than baby shit up against the run. The biggest problem for Jerome Ford is the fact that, based on what I know right now, Jameis Winston will not be the starter, and it's still going to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and that guy fucking sucks. I saw someone on Twitter say DTR's like, don't throw, run, maybe? That was the joke. Like, don't throw, run. Like, you can't, and I'm not going to claim to have made that joke because wasn't even that good of a joke, but don't throw, run, right? You can't throw the ball with that poor bastard under center. I think the Dolphins could end up getting up big in this game. I still think my Dolphins are not going to make the playoffs, even though I hope that everything goes our way and we do. It'd be a nice Christmas miracle for the boy, but ultimately Jerome Ford in a great matchup, back-to-back weeks inside the top 10. While there is reasons to worry about DTR, I don't think I can kind of rank him any lower than this. Next up, we got Breece Hall. Now, I know there's going to be people panicking about Breece Hall. Nick, Breece Hall's been really bad recently. Back-to-back weeks where he finished outside of the top 18. Oh, man. Well, he did end up getting his snaps increased, his touches increased. The Bills matchup is great. Shout out Tony the Tiger. The biggest problem here is just the Jets. You never know what you're going to get. It's like life, you know? It's a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Shout out to my boy Forrest. I do have in the background, it's not actually visible, but I do have a Forrest Gump hat. Shout out to Bubba Gumps. But Breece Hall, great matchup. The offense, not looking the best, right? Not looking their sharpest. Kind of leaves me kind of in limbo here where I don't want to rank him too high, but I also can't bury him because we all know Breece Hall doesn't need 25 touches to be successful. He could just get 14 carries like he got last week, 6 targets, and the motherfucker could score 30 fantasy points. Next up, we move into the low-end running back 2 range, and this is where things start to take a dip. And then you will notice Once we get past this grouping is when the real dip ends up occurring and where you start getting real nervous. You're shaking in your boots. You're thinking, what have I done to make the playoffs? And these are the fucking running backs that I have to start. So, before we talk about these running backs, and then the rest of the running backs, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends, our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up today using promo code Notorious, you'll receive your free pick, which is going to be on Wednesday. Patrick Mahomes higher than half of a total yard plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Now, they are going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Wednesday at 1 p.m., so you're going to want to match Patrick Mahomes with any other player playing not on the Chiefs on Wednesday or on Sunday, and if both of your picks hit, you will get around 3 times what you put into your pick'em. If you put in multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher, but obviously all of your picks have to hit. If you're watching this after Wednesday and you're like, Nick, Patrick Mahomes already played, well, if you stop using promo code Notorious, then you receive a different free pick, a NFL player higher than half of a total yard or a NBA player higher than half of a total point. And if you get the NBA one, don't worry, because even if you don't watch the NBA, all you have to do is match that with a player in the NFL, and you will still be able to get that same payout. So make sure you guys do check out Underdog, promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description to get your free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So next up, we got Brian Robinson Jr. of the Washington Commanders going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, if you started B-Rob last week, you're probably walking a little bit funny. You got absolutely fucked without the use of lube. I personally started him. He was part of the reason why my team went down like Uncle Junior in The Sopranos. So going up against the Falcons is a fine matchup. I didn't love what I saw last week. I'm a little bit nervous, but I don't want to panic too hard yet. Next up, we got, you might just get hit with Rico Dowdle going up against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. The Buccaneers held Rico in check last week, despite the fact that the Dallas Cowboys were playing incredibly well offensively in that game. Prior to last week, Rico had over 110 rushing yards in 3 straight games. So it was a top 16 running back in 3 straight games. So one game kind of fallen off the wagon there doesn't make me panic too much like he's on the Oregon Trail. Ultimately, though, this matchup is very, 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 very concerning up against the Eagles. So he's got to kind of get buried a little bit lower. Next up, we got Rashad with 2A's White going up against the Carolina Panthers. Last week was a bit of a doozy for him. 3 carries for 10 yards, but he made up for it with 8 targets, 7 receptions, 50 yards. But he did end up fumbling to lose the game. I don't know why people that make it into the NFL carry the ball like it's a fucking loaf of bread, running around with the ball like a fucking child running away with your phone to go play fucking Clash of Clans or something, right? Or some Subway Surfers. He's like holding the ball out like this, and it just looks stupid. It's like, what are you doing? And then he fumbles. Shocker, game lost. Now, the Panthers matchup is a bounce back spot. I feel fine about Rashad White, but obviously you would much rather have Bucky Irving. Next up, we move to Tyron Tracy to close out the low-end running back 2 tier, and Tracy kind of just is what he is. He's a great running back on a team that's a complete and utter dysfunctional mess. If the team was better, Tracy would be a top 18-ish guy weekly. Since he's on the Giants with the quarterback situation that is up in flames, not looking the best for Tracy. I like the spot for the matchup, but again, unsure of who the quarterback's going to be. Tracy's fine, but I don't really expect him to have this explosive game. Next up, we move on into the high-end running back 3s tier, beginning with Tony Pollard. Now, if you played Tony Pollard last week, the guy shit down his legs. His leg. I guess one of his legs, right? Most of the time when you take a shit, it doesn't go down both your pant legs, but, you know, that's never happened to me, so actually, no, I don't think it has. Running back 41 last week, running back 33 the week prior. No bueno. Tajay Spears is on top of the world, but I still think the team wants Pollard to be the guy. The matchup up against the Jaguars is amazing, so I do think Pollard plays better this week. Next up, we got Amir Abdullah. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people kind of doing tricks on Alexander Madison, giving him the Hawk special spin on that thing, right? Doing tricks on him like they're Shaun White, that ginger guy, that snowboards. I like Amir Abdullah. Even though he is an unk at this point, even though he is old, he still has that burst, he still has that speed, like his name was Lightning McQueen. We just saw the Saints get absolutely pile-drived by the rushing attack of the Packers. I'm pretty sure Chris Brooks Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson scored in that game. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, by the time it was like the third quarter, I kind of just zoned out. I was still watching, but I wasn't as dialed in. Like, normally I'm fucking laser eyes focused onto the game, but that was a game that you just knew was over instantly, so it wasn't like that crazy of a watch where I was dialed in a big way. But we just saw the Saints get absolutely pulverized. They got not even an Eiffel Tower. It was a triple-headed fucking by the Green Bay Packers. I love Amir Abdullah this week, but I kind of have to temper my expectations because while I love the matchup, they're still going to use Abdullah. They're still going to use Abdullah and Madison at the same time. Next up, we got Patrick Taylor Jr. Isaac Guerendo could end up getting the start in this game. He could end up returning, so I'm not going to really rank Patrick Taylor too high. I had him last week ranked relatively high up against the Dolphins. I thought, hey, this was a great matchup for him. We know the Dolphins defense gets stabbed up by the run. The Dolphins defense is terrible up against the run, but the Dolphins defense actually played pretty good against the run, and Patrick Taylor really couldn't get anything going as the running back 55. Now, I do believe brighter days are ahead. The Lions defense is incredibly banged up, so if Patrick Taylor gets the nod to start, I do think he's going to be fine, but I do think we kind of ranked him way too high last week. Next up, we got Mr. Alexander Mattison. He had more carries than Abdullah, but I do feel like Abdullah is more likely to have that big boom game. Shout out to Big AJ and Big Justice. 12 carries for 27 yards, 4 receptions on 7 targets for 29 yards and a touchdown. So while I do still believe that Amir Abdullah is the guy to have, again, we just saw this Saints team get pulverized. This Saints team get beaten to death. They literally stood zero chance. So while I don't think anyone is going to be just gung-ho to play anyone on the Raiders at this point in the season, I do think both running backs will be fine. Now, I got Ramondre Stevenson ranked at running back 27. His ECR is running back 21. Can you do something for me? The matchup up against the Chargers really concerns me. This is a game on Saturday for Ramondre Stevenson. I think the talent is there. I think he has the skills to pay the bills, but he is incredibly inconsistent. The offense is incredibly inconsistent, and the offense is typically down in games, which doesn't lead them to be able to run the rock a ton. The matchup against the Chargers, probably a game where they're not going to be able to run the ball a ton. Ramondre is very boom or bust, though. I wouldn't be shocked if he was a top 5 running back here, even against the Chargers. I also wouldn't be shocked if he was the running back 47. So with that all said, that's why he's ranked as the running back 27. Next up, we got the YOLO tier here, beginning with DeAndre Swift. Now, DeAndre Swift has completely fallen off. There is no nice way to say things. There is no kind of putting wrapping paper around it, put a gift wrap on it. Oh, he's going to be fine, this, that, and the other thing. I don't think things are going to be fine. I am very worried about DeAndre Swift, and I think you should be too. Now, I just realized at this point in the video that the flicker on my camera is definitely going a little bit crazy, so I'm just going to stay like this so it doesn't keep flickering. I apologize if that bothered your guys' eyes. I will have that fixed. I know how to fix it. I didn't realize it was happening, and it's Christmas Eve. I am very busy, so I apologize. Genuinely, there's no way that I can fix this now. I have to go somewhere at 1 o'clock. It's 12:12, so I'm going to finish this video, fucking upload that thing, and hopefully you guys enjoy, so I do apologize. And if there's people in the comments complaining, I get it. I'm not even going to say anything like, oh, you're a jackass complaining about that. No, rightfully so, right? I'd be annoyed too if I was the viewer. I do apologize. I do love you guys, though. Thank you guys for all the support this season. Back to DeAndre Swift. We are flickering like crazy right now. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to just, actually, I can fix it right now as we are talking. But what I was going to say is DeAndre Swift has been just as inconsistent as it gets. I do think that DeAndre Swift still has the talent. He still has the skill level. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, it just never really comes to fruition, especially when you are on a team that is as much of a disaster as the Chicago Bears. So, running back 28 feels fair. People have him ranked ECR as him as the running back 23. That's just way too high, in my opinion, even if you like the matchup up against Seattle. Then we got Tyjae Spears, who has been on fire, back-to-back games inside of the top 10. I love the spot here, but I do still think that the team wants Tony Pollard to be the guy. I still really believe that. Maybe that's just stupid to hold on to that hope, but it's not like Tyjae Spears is getting force-fed the ball. It's not like Tyjae Spears is sucking in 12 gazillion fucking targets a game. He's not, so I still feel fine with Tyjae Spears, ranked lower than Tony Pollard. Final guy in this tier is Gus Edwards. You know what Gus Edwards is. If he scores, you're happy. If not, you end up being disgusted. He scored 2 touchdowns last week. He still runs at the rate that old people fuck, which is incredibly slow. He runs like his feet are stuck in molasses. The spot against the Patriots is fine, but no one should be trusting him. Final tier here, the YOLO Part 2, beginning with Kendre Miller. Maybe a quarterback change here. Could be inevitable. Could fix things. The matchup against the Raiders is good, but the Saints suck cock. The Saints are terrible. Saints can't move the ball. Even if he's the lead back, it don't matter. Next up, we got Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne. Either one of these guys could be the running back one, or it could be a dead even split, which is pretty close to what we saw last week. The matchup against the Titans is good. It's looking like it might rain, which could indicate a more run-heavy game script. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Angela White, I don't really want to be trusting Tank Bigsby or ETN. Next up, we got Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. Kareem Hunt ended up being the guy you needed last week, or the guy you would have wanted. He scored the touchdown, 55 rushing yards, 24 receiving yards, 16 fantasy points, running back 18. And Pacheco was the running back 56. Pacheco hasn't scored more than 8 points a single time this season, except for prior to his injury. Matchup against the Steelers is fine, but I don't want to play him. And then we got Jaylen Warren in a incredibly tough spot. This is a real rough spot for him. It seems like he might have overtaken Najee Harris. Now you can rank Najee Harris right behind him if you want. Najee Harris has been shitting the bed a bunch recently, so I don't really want to be playing him either. So hopefully you have one of the guys in the first 1, 2, 3, 4 tiers. Once you get into the 5th tier, it starts to feel real gross, but after that, you're really just dumpster diving. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video to help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Live you guys more than you will ever know. Hope you guys do check out Underdog, promo code Notorious to get your free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Love you guys more than you will ever know. Hope you have a great one. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Have a great one. Let's eat some W's this week. Let's win your fantasy championship. Love you guys. Good boy.